Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of another deck that I've recently used to get top 5 with on the arena ladder. So as usual, there's going to be a Scryfall link down in the description, and if you click on that it'll have the full deck list there that you can just easily import into arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. As usual as well, I'm not going to be reading out the text on every single card, otherwise the video will go on for ages. So if you don't know what any of the cards do, just quickly pause the video, fire up the Scryfall link and have a quick read of any of the cards that you're unfamiliar with. So with that out of the way, this is my green-white humans deck in Historic. Now humans has been a very popular deck in the format for a little while now. I definitely think it was one of the best decks before Alchemy, but it's also got some really nice additions with Alchemy, so I think this is definitely one of the best decks in the format right now, and if you want to play an aggressive strategy, I definitely think this is the best way to go about it. So humans, if you've not played with this deck before, it's an aggro deck with a bunch of disruptive elements, and those disruptive elements are really what put it head and shoulders above the other aggro decks in the format in my opinion. So we're going to have a look at the 1-drop slot to start off with. Starting off with 4 copies of Esper Sentinel, which I consider one of, if not the best 1-drops in the whole format. So this is great against any deck that's running non-creature spells. If this ever draws you a card, you've already got more than enough value off it. But even if you don't get to draw a card off this just buys you great tempo because the opponent has to play their removal spells kind of a turn later than they normally would, or generally makes them play the non-creature spells off curve because they have to keep mana up in order to pay the tax off Esper Sentinel. So you either get to draw cards or it just gives you tempo, either of which are really, really good. We also have multiple ways to make the power and toughness bigger of Esper Sentinel. So we've got Thalia's Lieutenant and Catilda that can both put counters on it. And we've got Sagada in the sideboard that we can grab off the Huntmaster. So we've got quite a few ways of growing the Esper Sentinel as well, which makes it even more difficult for the opponent to pay the tax on this. So Esper Sentinel, one of the best 1-drops in the whole format, and I think because it's a human and because we have so many ways to buff it in the deck, this is probably the best shell to be playing Esper Sentinel in as well. Then the other 1-drops are all 1-ofs, and the reason for that is because of Ranger Captain of Eos. So Ranger Captain of Eos is a 3-mana 3/3, and when it enters the battlefield we can search our library for a 1-drop. So the reason that we've got all 1-ofs in addition to the Sentinel is just to give us kind of a toolbox of the Ranger Captain of Eos, so we've always got good options no matter what the situation is. The secondary ability on Ranger Captain of Eos is really, really important as well, so we can sacrifice it to make the opponent not be able to play non-creature spells for that turn. So the way that we use this is we set a stop during our opponent's upkeep, and at the very start of the turn we can sacrifice this, which is great against a deck like Control in order to stop them playing sorcery speed removal, most importantly sweeper effects like Wrath of God. We can use the Ranger Captain of Eos to stop them playing sweepers for the turn, any other sorcery speed removal, any planeswalkers they can't play that turn either, so really, really good against Control. Also very good against the spell-based combo decks, stuff like Indomitable Creativity and Emergent Ultimatum. We can use the Ranger Captain of Eos to stop them comboing off for that turn, as well as stopping them playing sweepers as well. And then there are also some other decks as well that like to chain together a bunch of non-creature spells. Stuff like Is It Phoenix? We can sacrifice this to stop them playing any instants or sorceries to get Phoenixes back from the graveyard. And a deck like Auras as well, we can use this to stop the opponent playing any Auras for that turn, it buys us a huge amount of tempo, because Auras is a deck where if we don't stop them they can make a really big lifelinking creature, which is really difficult to deal with. So don't forget about the secondary ability on Ranger Captain of Eos, because it can single-handedly win you a bunch of games against those non-creature decks. But yeah, the main ability is being able to grab the 1-ofs here. So Dauntless Bodyguard and Ollenbock Escort both do a similar thing in that they're both protecting our other creatures. Now Ollenbock Escort, we need to have a +1/+1 counter on our creatures in order for it to be able to protect stuff. We've got Thalia's Lieutenant and Catilda that can both do that. Thalia's Lieutenant is arguably the most powerful card in the deck, and we do have a bunch of ways to dig for this between Inquisitor Captain and Collected Company, so it's actually not too difficult to set up +1/+1 counters on stuff in order to protect them with the Ollenbock Escort. The other really big advantage of Ollenbock Escort over Dauntless Bodyguard is, first of all, that we don't need to target the creature we're going to protect when it enters the battlefield. So that means that we can play this on turn 1 and then protect another creature later in the game, kind of like how Selfless Savior works. The other big advantage is that it gives the creature lifelink as well, which is actually really important against a lot of the decks in the format right now, because there are a decent number of decks that can punish you for stabilizing at a low life total. Is it Phoenix, for example, can get a bunch of hasty damage with the Arclight Phoenixes coming back from the yard. Any sacrifice decks using the Cat Oven loops can burn you out from a low life total with Cat Oven, and also any decks running burn spells like Lightning Helix can similarly burn you out at a low life total. So the ability to give our biggest creature with a counter lifelink just helps to put those games out of reach from the opponent where they do have access to ways to burn you out. And additionally, you know, we don't have any other ways to gain life in the deck, so the fact that we have Ollenborg Escort as a card that we can tutor off the Ranger Captain to gain us a bit of life is really nice. Then Dauntless Bodyguard, the advantage of this over the Ollenborg Escort is, first of all, it has more power. So, you know, playing this on turn 1 in an aggro deck just helps to get more damage in the early game. But the biggest advantage is that we can use it to protect creatures when we don't have +1/+1 counters. So if we play the Ranger Captain and we don't have immediate access to a Thalia's Lieutenant or a Catilda, and we need to protect our creatures, we can just use the Ranger Captain to grab a Dauntless Bodyguard and protect our biggest creature from a Wrath or just removal. So it's really nice to have both of these options here. Then Giant Killer is a tutorable removal spell, so we can use this to kill any big creatures. And obviously playing an aggro deck, if the opponent plays a big creature in the early game, that's a good way for them to make our attacks not very good. So if we're playing against 5-color Niv, for example, and they get Territorial Carvu down on turn 2, that can be quite difficult to attack around, so being able to tutor Giant Killer there is really nice. Similarly, Indomitable Creativity is a deck that's very good against creatures if they're running the Serra's Emissary build, and Giant Killer gives us a tutorable way to deal with that game 1. And then we can also just play it as a creature and start tapping down opponents' creatures afterwards, which is really powerful against a lot of decks. And then the final card in the toolbox here is Thraben Inspector, which just creates a clue when it enters the battlefield. So this is just good if we need to draw cards. You know, if we don't really have anything else going on and we just need to keep the cards flowing, we can just grab a Thraben Inspector, get a clue, and then just sacrifice it to draw a card. Then onto the 2-drops. We got 4 copies of Sigardian Evangel, which is one of the new cards from Alchemy, and I've been so impressed with this card. I didn't really think it would be that good when I first read it, but this card has really overperformed for me. So Luminarch Aspirant is a card that was commonly run in humans before Alchemy. Obviously that got nerfed in Alchemy, but I think that Sigardian Evangel is actually quite a bit better than pre-nerf Aspirant, so this is a very easy replacement for that slot. So what this card does is it's a 2-mana 3/1, and when it enters the battlefield, it taps down any permanent on the opponent's side. So that can be a creature, a land, or an artifact, or, you know, whatever you need to tap down. Usually creatures, though, to enable us to attack. And then it conjures another copy of itself in your hand that you discard at the beginning of the next end step. So if we cast this on turn 2, it's a 2-mana 3/1 that usually just taps down a creature to enable us to attack in, which in an aggro deck, you know, that's fine, that's not too bad. But as we go up in increments of even mana, this becomes so much more powerful. So as we have, you know, say we have 4 mana, for example, we can pay 2 mana, put this into play as a 3/1, tap down the opponent's biggest creature, and then we conjure another copy in our hand, so we can then pay 2 more mana to play the conjured copy, and we get another 3/1 that can tap something else down. And then, you know, as we get to 6 mana, we can do it 3 times. As we get to 8 mana, we can do it 4 times. So this is just a really good way of tapping down all the opponent's creatures and putting a bunch of power into play really fast as well. Additionally, it also combos really well with Collected Company, because if we cast Collected Company during our opponent's end step and we hit the Sigardian Evangel, obviously we get to tap down something during our opponent's end step, but the copy that we conjure into our hand doesn't get discarded until our next end step. So say we cast Company when we have 6 mana and we hit an Evangel, it enters play, we can tap something down, it conjures the copy into our hand that we don't discard because we get it during our opponent's end step, and then we can cast 3 Sigardian Evangels, which puts an extra 9 power into play and taps down 3 other creatures, and then we can attack with the first one as well. So this is just such a powerful card as like a good mana sink in the late game, but also just an insane way at tapping down opponents' blockers and closing the game out really fast. So, and obviously on top of that, it's a human as well, so it plays into all of our human synergies. So been so impressed with this card. It's such a big pickup for the deck, and especially in combination with Collected Company, it's so strong. Then we got 3 copies of Thalia. This is kind of one of the biggest reasons to be playing the deck, because Thalia is so good against the more controlling or generally the non-creature decks in the format. So obviously it's great against control because their deck is full of non-creature stuff. It taxes all their removal, it makes them play their board sweepers a turn later than normal, makes them play their planeswalkers a turn later than normal. Great against the spell-based combo decks as well, like Indomitable Creativity and Emergent Ultimatum, like I was talking about earlier. And similarly as well, it's great against decks like Phoenix or Auras that are going to try and chain together a bunch of cheap non-creature spells. You know, Phoenix is trying to chain together a bunch of instants and sorceries to get counters on their Sprite Dragon and get back Phoenixes repeatedly. And Auras is trying to chain together a bunch of Auras to make their creatures really big. And Thalia essentially doubles the cost of all of their cards, so it slows those decks down so much. Only running 3 copies because first of all it's legendary, so drawing multiples of these can be, you know, it can clog up your hand a little bit. But also it's not great against every deck. You know, obviously taxing non-creature spells isn't that great against decks that are primarily creatures. The fact it has first strike does make it decent in combat, or not too bad in combat anyway. But there are certain matchups where we side this out, so... But in the other matchups where they are running a bunch of non-creatures, Thalia is such an important card that we do want to be drawing it a lot of the time. And we do have the 4th copy in the sideboard for those matchups as well. Then on to Thalia's Lieutenant. And like I said earlier, this is arguably the most powerful card in the deck because of the sheer amount of power that it can put into play really, really fast. And then it grows itself afterwards. Typically before, you know, this is the card that the deck was digging for the most. And one of the biggest advantages of now running Inquisitor Captain that I'm going to get to in a bit is that we can hit our Lieutenant way sooner. So we can go wide with a bunch of humans and then Lieutenant to boost the power of our whole board and just attack in for a huge amount of damage really, really fast. So Lieutenant, one of the most important cards in the deck for sure. And then finally we've got 1 copy of Catilda, Dawnheart Prime. So this is a 2-mana Mana Dork, but it also turns all of our other humans into Mana Dorks as well. So first of all, at a baseline rate, even if this is the only card we have on turn 2, it allows us to ramp into our Captain and Company on turn 3, which is really nice. But it also just helps us produce a huge amount of mana. You know, if we have this in our opening hand, we can ramp to 6 mana on turn 3, which is insane to have access to in an aggro deck. It also combos really, really well with the Sigardian Evangel because we can use all of the humans that we have on board to just repeatedly cast the conjured copies of the Evangel over and over again. And it also has its own mana sink inbuilt. You know, this is a card that we want to have on turn 2 to be able to ramp, but if we do hit this later in the game, the fact that we can repeatedly put counters on our whole board as well gives us something that we can use it for in the late game as well. The reason that I'm only running 1 copy is, first of all, it's legendary, so there are definitely diminishing returns on this card, but also I don't really have any other room in the deck. Honestly, if I was going to run 1 or 2 more non-land cards in the main deck, I probably would run more Catilda, but I think as a one-of, as a legendary creature, where there are diminishing returns on drawing multiples of this, I'm really happy with the one-of, because if you have it in your opening hand, it leads to really explosive starts. And then if we hit it later in the game, it just gives us something to do with all of our mana in the late game as well. So really big fan of this card, and I think it works really nicely as a one-of. Ranger Captain of Eos I've already talked about, but yeah, super important card of being able to dig for our one-ofs, and the secondary ability of being able to cut off the non-creature spells for a turn is really, really important. Then another new card from Alchemy that I think is really nice in this shell is Grizzled Huntmaster. So this is a 3-mana 4/3, which is, again, decent stats, especially good in an aggro deck. And what this card does is it allows us to replace creatures or multiple copies of that creature from our hand and replace them with copies of creatures from our sideboard. So one of the generic problems of playing an aggro deck is that they're pretty one-dimensional. And having access to Grizzled Huntmaster is really nice because it gives us real flexibility in the deck. It gives us outs to certain situations, but it also gives us, you know, we can dig for stuff for card advantage if we're behind. We can dig for stuff to boost our whole board if we're already ahead. So just the flexibility that this gives is really, really nice in the deck. One thing I would say is if you're not used to playing with Huntmaster, you do need to remember that the effect doesn't trigger unless you already have a creature in your hand. So like with all the other Huntmaster decks, you need to always be asking yourself before you cast the last creature in your hand whether it's worth it. Because if you play out your last creature and then you draw a Huntmaster, or you draw a captain or company and then hit a Huntmaster, you can't use the ability. So you should always ask yourself before playing the last creature, is it worth me holding on to this in case I draw a Huntmaster, a captain or company, so that I can use the effect. One other thing I would say as well is, if you go to options and gameplay, while playing this deck, you want to make sure that auto-ordered triggered abilities is unticked, because there are certain situations where, for example, if you collected company and hit Ranger Captain and Huntmaster, you want to order your triggers in a way so that the Ranger Captain resolves first. You can tutor up a 1-drop into your hand, and then you can exile that 1-drop to use the Huntmaster ability. Whereas if you have this ticked, it will automatically order them the other way around, so that if you didn't have a creature in your hand when you hit these two, you don't get the Huntmaster ability. And on that same note as well, Ranger Captain actually combos quite nicely with the Huntmaster, because we can Ranger Captain to dig for a 1-drop, and then that's another creature in our hand that we can use to exile with the Huntmaster. But Huntmaster is just a really great card at giving a deck that was very rigid before a lot more flexibility, and main deck outs to certain scenarios that it would never be able to get out previously as well. Then we've got 4 copies of Collected Company. This is one of the best company decks in the format, even before the Alchemy cards came out. Just really good at being able to hit whatever we need, getting a bunch of power into play really quickly, and the fact that company now gets even better because of Sigardian Evangel is just really strong and helps push this deck over the edge a little bit more. And then the final new card that we've got from Alchemy is 4 copies of Inquisitor Captain, and I think this is another deck that really could have done with another company style effect, and Inquisitor Captain fits perfectly into that slot because, first of all, it's a human itself, which plays really well with the rest of the human synergies in the deck, but it has so many good hits off this as well. We can Inquisitor Captain into Lieutenant is so strong. Like I said, this is a card that we always want to dig for, and when it enters play, it will buff our whole board, including the Inquisitor Captain itself. Inquisitor Captain into the Evangel can also be good if we need to tap stuff down, and especially if we have extra mana available. Hitting Ranger Captain allows us to dig for stuff, hitting the Huntmaster allows us to pull from the sideboard, so Captain just giving us another way to refuel, another way to put multiple creatures into play is so strong, and I think it's such a great addition to the deck. So that's the main deck, or that's the non-lands anyway. The mana base itself, running 24 lands. Now most human decks were previously running 23 lands, but they were only running 4 drops, they were only running 4 company, and now we're running essentially 8 4-drops with the Captain as well. I think going up to 24 lands is a definite must. I have made one change to the mana base since the gameplay that I recorded that I'll show you in a bit, and that change is replacing one of the planes with an unclaimed territory, and the main reason for that is because I had a few too many games where I couldn't cast Grizzled Huntmaster on curve because it's double green, and so I've cut planes here and added an unclaimed territory just to give us another green source so that we can cast Huntmaster on curve as often as possible. Obviously in an aggro deck you want to be able to play something on each turn anyway, you want to be able to curve out, but I found in certain matchups where I would have 2 white sources on turn 3 and not be able to cast the Huntmaster, there would also be a lot of situations where I would kind of need to grab something from my sideboard on turn 3, and not being able to do that would put me too far behind on tempo. So I really want to be able to curve out, untapped land on turn 1, untapped land on turn 2, and have double green and untapped land on turn 3 to play Huntmaster as often as possible. That's one of the main reasons we're not running more copies of Unclaimed Territory, because Sunpetal Grove is a really important card to ensure that we have untapped mana on turn 1 and turn 2 as well. The more planes we cut for cards like Unclaimed Territory or Overgrown Farmland, the more often Sunpetal Grove is entering tapped. And like I said, the whole goal of this deck, with the mana base anyway, is to try and have untapped lands from 1 all the way to 4, and also have double green for Huntmaster. So that's the reason why we're not running any utility lands as well, because the more planes or other cards that we cut for stuff like Castle Ardenvale or Cave of the Frost Dragon, the less likely we are to be able to curve out and cast Huntmaster on turn 3. And as an aggro deck, if you stumble on mana, that can often be the difference between winning and losing the game. Another reason why I'm not going harder on the unclaimed territory over something like overgrown farmland that enters tapped on turn 1 and 2 is because we have multiple creatures in the sideboard that aren't humans, namely Sigarda and Voracious Hydra. And if we're running for unclaimed territory, the chances of us not being able to cast these when we pull them off the Huntmaster is pretty high. So that's the main deck. I've been really happy with how it's been performing and doing really well with the list, and I definitely think with the addition of Evangel, Huntmaster and Inquisitor Captain, what was already a tier 1 deck has gotten even better. So I'm really happy with the main deck. And then onto the sideboard, like I said, we've got a bunch of one-offs to be able to tutor off the Huntmaster, but we've also got a lot of other cards as well. One of the main reasons I like Huntmaster in this deck is because I feel we don't need as many tutor targets, which gives us more room to run actual sideboard cards as well. So starting off with 2 copies of Portable Hull, I guess I should talk about Skyclave Apparition because they're very similar for what we want here. They're both basically just removal, both very good against other creature decks to clear the way for our attackers to get in. And the reason that I'm running 2 Portable Hull and 2 Apparition over 4 Skyclave Apparition is because, as seems to be kind of a trend with the decks I'm building at the moment, this deck does get hurt a fair bit by Hushbringer because it shuts off our Evangel, it shuts off our Lieutenant ability, our Ranged Captain, Huntmaster and Inquisitor Captain ability. So I feel like it's worth dedicating 2 of the sideboard slots to Portable Hull to be able to deal with Hushbringer, and it can deal with a lot of the same stuff that Apparition is trying to deal with anyway. It can kill Witch's Oven and Trail of Crumbs against the green-black Lurrus deck. It can kill most of the small creatures that we want as well. Now typically, if Hushbringer wasn't a thing, I think it would definitely be correct to be running 4 Apparition, because Apparition pairs really nicely with Company and Captain when we do need removal. But I think because we can afford to run Portable Hull, we probably should here. One of the reasons that I'm not running Reprobation over Portable Hull, which is a card that I've typically been running in these green-white decks to shut off Hushbringer because it plays around Kaya's Ghost form, specifically against the black-white Auras deck, is because, first of all, this deck doesn't get as shut down by Hushbringer as something like the Heliod combo deck or the Bamp Blink deck, because we can still get a decent amount of power into play quickly even if we don't get our Enter the Battlefield triggers, and stuff like Catilda can still activate its ability. But the additional downside of using Reprobation is that it doesn't remove the creature, they still have it there as a chump blocker, and against a combo or mid-range deck like the green-white Heliod combo deck or the Bamp Blink deck, that's fine because chump blocking is not really an issue. Whereas when you're playing an aggro deck, using Reprobation and then being able to chump block one of your attackers is definitely a problem when you're playing aggressive strategy and you need to try and force damage through. So I prefer Portable Hull for that reason. And also, like I said, it has a bit more variety in what it can hit, because it can hit stuff like Witch's Oven and Trail of Crumbs against the Sacrifice decks. While we're on the topic, Skyclave Apparition, we always keep one of these in the sideboard in order to hit off the Grizzled Huntmaster. And the reason why I like having 4 copies of these cards is because typically the matchups where Thalia isn't very good are against the creature decks. So a very easy way to sideboard against those decks is to just cut the 3 Thalias and replace them with 2 Portable Hulls and a Skyclave Apparition. And then we've still got that 4th copy of Skyclave Apparition in the sideboard to be able to pull with the Huntmaster. But Apparition, very similar to Portable Hull, but it just hits more stuff and is a creature itself, so it can be hit off Company and Captain. So just good removal for anything with mana value 4 or less, basically. Just super good, varied removal. And then we've got 2 copies of Rest in Peace. Very important right now because there are a lot of decks that can gain a bunch of advantage using the graveyard. Stuff like Is It Phoenix? It shuts off Delirium for Dragon's Rage Chandler and Unholy Heat, as well as stopping them getting Phoenixes back. The green-black Lurrus deck can be a nightmare as well for an aggressive strategy like ours. So Rest in Peace really helps in that matchup at just shutting off the Cat Oven loops, because that's the main way that they start generating advantage. And, Cat Oven is very difficult for our deck to beat because it just produces a chump block over and over every single turn. And then there are also a bunch of other more all-in graveyard decks like Reanimator, Dragonstorm, Arcanist, the Rest in Peace is great against. And additionally as well, you know, Control I feel is typically a good matchup for us because we have Esper Sentinel and Thalia and stuff like that. But the Opus Gearhulk decks are more of an issue because they're much faster. They can commit to the board quickly. You know, a turn 2 pitch Magma Opus, turn 3 Mizzix's Mastery is really difficult to beat. So Rest in Peace is really good in that matchup at stopping their fast interaction, shutting off the Gearhulk Opus stuff, and then we can usually beat the rest of their deck then as well. So Rest in Peace, really important card in the deck. Then we've got the 4th copy of Thalia here, just for the matchups where it's really good. So like I said, Control, spell-based combo decks, and decks that are trying to chain together a bunch of non-creature spells like Auras and Phoenix. This is an absolute all-star against. And then the rest of the cards in the deck, these are all one of tutor targets to hit off the Huntmaster. So Giant Killer, like I was mentioning earlier, just a good way to deal with big creatures like Niv, Territorial Karvu, Sarah's Emissary, Elder Gargoth, anything like that is really good. Containment Priest is a card that does shut off some of the stuff in our deck. It does shut off the card we get off Inquisitor Captain as well as Collected Company, but the stuff that we would tutor this against is stuff that is doing way more powerful stuff than we are. So first of all, this is great against a deck like Indomitable Creativity because we can flash this in to stop their creativity. Against a deck like Goblins, the main way that we're losing against them is with Muxus, so this just shuts off their Muxus avenue of attack, and we can usually win the game from that point. And then also, a deck like the Bant Blink deck is abusing Inquisitor Captain way more than us, and if they can get a Captain down and just flood the board with creatures, that's really difficult for us to deal with. So even though Containment Priest does shut off our own Captain and Company, grabbing this against decks that are doing more degenerate things like that, this is very good to grab against them just to shut off their really powerful avenues of attack. And it's also a human itself, so it can play with our other human synergies like Thalia's Lieutenant and Catilda as well. Then we've got a single copy of Skyclave Cleric. This is here predominantly as a tutorable land. Like I said, 24 lands is usually enough for us to draw our 4th land on turn 4. But if we have a bunch of Captains and Companies in our hand and we're stuck on 3 lands, being able to use the Huntmaster just to grab a land to ensure that we can play our Companies and Captains on the following turn is really important. And there will also be some very fringe scenarios where if we have 2 mana up and we need to gain life for whatever reason, we could grab this as the creature side, but we're predominantly using this as a tutorable land. Then we've got 1 copy of Archon of Absolution. This is an absolute all-star in the mirror match because it's really difficult for other humans' decks to beat this. Protection from white basically means they can't attack, and paying 1 for all of their creatures is also really difficult for them to beat. Similarly, this is also really good against the Bant Blink decks because almost all of their removal is white, and they tend to win by going wide as well. And we can also use this against the green-white Heliod deck if they've comboed off. I mean, typically we're not beating boards like that anyway, but this is a way to stop them from attacking in with all their squirrels if we're in that scenario as well. But just being able to grab this in the mirror match basically ensures that we're going to win. And against the Bant Blink decks, it slows them down a lot as well. Then we've got a single copy of Toski. This is here predominantly for control, and whenever I'm running Huntmaster, I always want to make sure I have at least 1 uncounterable spell. So if we do manage to force a Huntmaster, if we then get what we pull from the sideboard countered, that's a bit of a disaster. So the main 2 options we have here are Toski or Shifting Ceratops. Now, because our deck, when we're playing against control, the weakest, or the card that we're the weakest to, are sweeper style effects like Wrath of God, and so I much prefer Toski to Shifting Ceratops because the Toski will survive most of the destruction effects like Wrath of God and Anger of the Gods, and because we're a go wide creature deck, the turn that we play this, we can get in for a bunch of damage normally and get to draw a bunch of cards immediately anyway, which means that we're almost always getting the value off it immediately. So Toski, just almost always the best card to be pulling against control. Then we've got 1 Sigarda. So this is really nice if we don't have anything in particular going on, or if we need to just boost the power of our board. So 4/4 with Flying and Trample, decent stats anyway, actually pretty good against a deck like Is It Phoenix because it can block Arc-like Phoenixes. But it gives all of our humans +1/+1, so it gives us a tutorable Anthem effect. And then if we have 3 creatures with different powers, whenever it attacks, we can look at the top of our library and put a human into our hand. So this is just good like a generic board stall at just generating us card advantage every turn, but it's also doubles up as a tutorable Anthem effect for all of our humans as well. Then we've got one copy of Yashan, pretty much here just for the sacrifice decks. This is incredibly good against the Jund Food or Green-Black Lurrus or Jund Citadel decks at just slowing them down until they can find a removal spell. And the fact that we can grab multiple copies off the Huntmaster throughout the course of the game is really nice. And then finally we've got one copy of Voracious Hydra, and this is here pretty much exclusively to kill opposing Archon of Absolutions. So like I said, it is very difficult for the humans deck to beat an Archon of Absolution, so having a tutorable way to kill that is really nice. And we only need 4 mana in order to kill it. We can make a 2/3 to trade with the Archon of Absolution, and then if we have 5 mana we can make a 3/4 that can kill the Archon of Absolution, and then we get to keep a creature as well. So having a tutorable way to kill what is essentially the hardest card for our deck to deal with is really nice. And also, in addition to that, there are some creatures in the format that can not be killable by Skyclave Apparition or Giant Killer, so Voracious Hydra just gives us a way to deal with those sort of more fringe creatures as well. So that's the deck. If you've got any questions at all, drop me a comment below and I'll do my best to answer you. Now onto the gameplay. I've just got a couple games that I was playing on the ladder with this deck, so I hope you enjoy. Big up. Okay, nice. So we get to go first here, which is great. And yeah, this hand looks good. We've got a very fast start here. Multiple lieutenants and then Evangel as well is really strong. So we'll definitely run the escort out on turn 1 here. And then we'll almost definitely go lieutenant on turn 2, because ideally, Sigardian Evangel is a fine card to play on turn 2 if you just want to curve out. But we ideally want to save it until turn 4 to get maximum value out of it. So opponent's on Blood Fountain, which is almost definitely the affinity deck, I'd imagine. We'll play the lieutenant out here before combat just because it makes the escort bigger. And then if we don't draw anything else good next turn, we'll definitely go lieutenant to buff our board again. And then, drawing off 4th land for Evangel is huge here because, okay, captain's a great draw, but we'll definitely play lieutenant out here. Yeah, having Evangel with 2 lieutenants on board is really strong because we can tap down the opponent's board and then put 2 counters on each of our lieutenants as well because we have 2 humans entering the play that turn. So Steel Overseer is interesting from the opponent. Most affinity decks aren't as focused on the creatures. So we do have Captain here, but I'm happy to just play Evangel because we can tap down both of our creatures and put 2 extra power on both of our lieutenants. We're getting in for a massive amount of damage here, so I think it's going to be very difficult for the opponent to come back from this. They are running a slightly different build to most ones I've seen with the Steel Overseer and the Sai, but I very much doubt they've got sweepers in the main deck, especially if they're running something like Sai. So we put them down to 1 here already, and it's gonna. I think from this point, it's, I'd imagine we'd be good enough to win here. They need either multiple removal spells or multiple artifacts to get blockers with Sai. Yeah, sweet. So that was pretty quick. Even though they are playing Affinity, which does have a decent amount of non-creature stuff, most Affinity decks do have a good mixture of creatures and non-creatures, so I think Thalia does drop off a little bit here. And the fact they're playing Steel Overseer makes me think they're playing a more creature-focused variant, so I'm happy cutting the Thalias here and just replacing them with 2 portal holes and 1 apparition, and then we can keep the second apparition in the sideboard to pull off Huntmaster if we need. Yeah, this hand looks great as well. We've got a nice curve out here, and if we can draw our 4th land, we've either got that double Evangel play again, or Collected Company on 4, which is great. Sweet, there we go, 4th land. So Sentinel on 1 here, and then Lieutenant buffs the Sentinel up to 2, so any non-creatures they play will likely draw us a card at that point, which is really nice. So yeah, just seeing the power, like the amount of tempo Sentinel can buy here is great. Captain's a great draw as well. So we'll get him for 2 damage here. See what the opponent's got. Okay, so they get a Thought Monitor down. Since we've drawn decent 2-drops here, if we don't draw another 2 or 3 drop, I'm happy to play Evangel here, definitely, because we can tap down the Thought Monitor and just get in for a bunch of damage. I think we'll play the Escort first here, just in case they have Fatal Push. They'll kind of need to use it now, otherwise we can protect the Lieutenant or the Sentinel. Doesn't look like they do. And then we can play the Evangel, tap down the Thought Monitor. Even though we don't get to cast the Conjured version of Evangel, we have both Company and Captain for next turn, so yeah, this is looking pretty good. Get him for 5 damage here, put him down to 11. See what they've got here. Okay, Grafdigger's Cage is a little bit annoying considering we've got Company, but we do have Captain, and Captain gets around the cage because it conjures to our hand first. And, okay, Mirror Enforcer as well. But I mean, we'll be able to turn the Lieutenant into a 4/4, and I think we'll probably just be attacking with everything here anyway, just to force through a bunch of damage. See what we hit off the Captain. So we could range a Captain for a Giant Killer to kill the Mirror Enforcer, but again, I think we're so far ahead on tempo here that we're probably better off just going for the Evangel, tap down the Mirror Enforcer and just attack with everything. And then that's just so much power in play. We're going to put them pretty low here, you know, even if they chump the Lieutenant here, we're still getting in for 6 damage, which puts them down to 5. And then we've got Captain next turn as well. Okay, so they block the Sentinel, so what, they're going down to 2 here? And we've still, like I said, we've still got Captain the following turn, so... Okay. Thought Monitor, that's 1 blocker. They need what, 4 blockers here? Or 4 removal spells? Okay, so they exiled the Lieutenant. What else have they got? Okay, sweet, nice. I think that shows the power of the new Evangel by so much tempo. Okay, sweet. So we get to go first here, which is great. And yeah, this looks like a great hand. You know, no 1-drop, but we've got Thalia on 2, Huntmaster on 3. We've got double green for the Huntmaster, and if we can draw our 4th land, we've got Captain and Company at the top end. So okay, hopeful initiate. So probably the mirror match here, I'd imagine. And even though we've got Company in hand, I think I want to play Thalia out here because it's better mana efficiency, and it also makes combat a lot more difficult for the opponent. You know, they can't freely attack him with the hopeful initiate. Okay, 4th land is great, because that means that we can play Captain next turn. We'll Huntmaster and grab Archon of Absolution here, which, you know, I think that could be good enough to win the game on its own. I very much doubt the opponent has a main deck way to kill the Archon, and it's so difficult for the humans deck to beat. No attacks here, because if they have Apparition or Cathar for the Huntmaster, yeah, sweet, they do have Apparition. We can trade off the Thalia here, which means that we can play Company next turn. Or, Company is live again, basically. If we'd have attacked in there, then we would have been very vulnerable to an Apparition, so I'm glad we hold back. Play out the Archon here because, you know, if we play the Company and the Captain, sorry, if we play the Company or the Captain and we whiff, and the opponent has a really strong turn, they could force in a bunch of damage. So playing the Archon here basically just stabilises us. They can't attack in here, or the only way they'd be able to attack is if they played like multiple Lieutenants, and if they tap out to develop their board, they can no longer pay the tax to attack from Archon. So Archon basically just stabilises us here completely, and then we can play Company next turn. Okay, interesting. So they're playing the Abzan version, which does make me worry a little bit that they might have a main deck way to kill the Archon. I mean, from my experience, the only removal that the Abzan build runs is Dire Tactics, which Archon can dodge, thankfully, so I'm pretty confident they don't have a main deck way to deal with it, but it might be worth playing around if we draw a Dauntless Bodyguard, just protecting the Archon. So it's a bit annoying here that they're forcing us to tap down the lands, because it means that we have to Company during their main phase rather than their end step, which means that if we hit our own Evangel, we don't get to keep it. or we don't get to keep the conjured copy during our turn, which is a little bit annoying. We're going to tap our lands down first here, because if we company, it gives them more information, and they could also use their additional copies of Evangel to tap down our creatures. So here, definitely getting Ranger Captain. I don't think Thalia or Esper Sentinel does much, so it's between Evangel and Thraben Inspector for the last card. And I think, you know, the way that the opponent can win this game, even with Archon on the board, would be if they have multiple lieutenants and they can just stack a bunch of stats on the board and then attack around the Archon. And I think... sorry, I just needed to think there. Yeah, sorry, what I was saying is... I'd much rather get a 3-1 onto the battlefield to make combat difficult for the opponent in case they have an explosive turn. We're grabbing the Dauntless Bodyguard here because, like I said, you know, even though I very much doubt they have main deck removal for the Archon, Dauntless Bodyguard basically means that we can play around that now. We can protect the Archon, which I think will win us the game. So we'll Captain first here. You know, drawing a land for turn was great there because we can play Captain into Lieutenant. I think we'll just grab a Thraben Inspector here because after we play this Lieutenant, we're going to play the Bodyguard on Archon next turn and we'll be kind of out of gas at that point, so Thraben Inspector just helps to draw us a card. And I think we've got enough stats on board here that we can start attacking with the Archon here. You know, the only way that they could attack next turn is if they have removal like Apparition or Cathar, or they have Lieutenant. And if they tap out to develop more, that means they have less mana to attack because of the Archon tax. So I feel pretty safe about attacking with Archon here. They do have pretty good blocks, so I don't feel safe blocking with anything else. Okay, so they do have Cathar here. I imagine they'll take one of our 4/4s, probably a Ranger Captain. Okay, so they target the Inquisitor Captain, which is a bit of a surprise because if we have removal for the Cathar, we get another Captain trigger. You know, if we kill it, we get the Inquisitor Captain back, so I think that's better for us though. So now if we can Huntmaster, we can get an Apparition, exile the Cathar, and then get a Captain back. So here land is obviously not a great draw, but we can play the Inspector and draw a card to see what we hit. Okay, another land isn't great. And there is something to be said about holding onto the Bodyguard in case we draw a Huntmaster, but like I said, you know, we're so far ahead here because of the Archon. I don't think it's worth, you know, if the opponent is playing Fatal Push, I don't think it's worth, which I don't think they are, but on the off chance they are, I think it's worth just getting the Bodyguard down just to shut off that avenue from the opponent. Because I feel as long as we've got this Archon, we're pretty much odds-on favourite to win here. So I still don't think they've got great attacks, but they might have to attack anyway because they don't have anything else going on now. The only way they beat Archon is trying to attack around it, so... Okay, so they are attacking, and if they attack like this, I'll definitely trade Archon... Well, I'll block one of their Evangels with Archon. I think I'll block the other Evangel. You know, I'm happy to trade my 4/2 for their 5/3. And then the Hopeful Initiate... even though they have Kudro's ability can kill one of our Ranger Captains, but I'm still pretty happy double blocking the Hopeful Initiate with my Ranger Captains here, because if they use the Kudro ability, they either have to sacrifice both Evangels, which means that my 4/2 survives, or they have to sack an Evangel and a Lieutenant, and I'm very happy for them to trade in a Lieutenant here, because that's just a creature that will grow over the course of a game. So it looks like they are using Kudro here. We'll see what they sack though. They can't afford to sack the Cathar obviously because we get Captain back, and sacking the Hopeful Initiate just completely defeats the whole point. So okay, so they do sack the Lieutenant, which I'm happy with that trade. We'll sack the Captain in response. It doesn't matter at all. I don't really know why I did that, to be honest, but so Cathar flips. So again, there is something to be said about holding on to Lieutenant for Huntmaster here, but I think it's important to play out because Cathar flips into a red creature. So by playing the Lieutenant here, our first Lieutenant becomes a 5/5, which means they can't attack in. Well, it's not free for them to attack in with the Moonrage Brute anymore. And I'm keeping this land in hand just because we have so much mana in play that I think we're getting more upside from bluffing instant speed removal than just playing out our, what would it be? like our 8th land or whatever it is. So Cathar is interesting in this spot because, well, I mean, since we have a 5/5, keeping it on the Moonrage Brute side isn't that impactful for the opponent. Captain's a great draw here, obviously. But yeah, I imagine the opponent is probably trying to double spell here in order to flip the Cathar back. Oh wow, that's great. But we are getting so far ahead on the board here that I don't think that'll matter. This just shows how powerful Inquisitor Captain into Lieutenant is. So we're definitely far enough ahead on board that we can start attacking with the Archon again here. Unfortunately, I don't think we can attack in even with the 8/8 Lieutenant because they can animate their Cave of the Frost Dragon and double block with Hopeful Initiate and the Cave. So I don't think it's worth attacking in with the Lieutenant here. But as long as we have enough defense on board, we can just win in 4 turns with this Archon, because unless they have like a black or green creature with reach or flying, which I know that the Abzan Humans deck doesn't run, we should be good to win here. So okay, so we drew Ollenbach Escort. Again with attacks, I think we'll just attack with the Archon. Can't afford to attack him with anything else. We'll definitely hold on to this Escort in case we draw the Huntmaster, and since we have another card in hand, I think I feel happy playing the land out here. Okay, another Hopeful Initiate. So I imagine they've probably got another spell here to try and flip this Cathar back. Yeah, okay. So they've got Lieutenant, and they still don't have good attacks here, so I imagine they'll probably flip the Cathar back and take our Lieutenant here. Which means that if we can hit Huntmaster, then Apparition on that Cathar is going to be brutal. Oh wow, okay, that's really lucky, sweet. So we could Huntmaster and get a second Archon, which is probably good enough to win the game, but I think it's much more impactful here to just trade in this Escort for an Apparition. Then we can exile the Brutal Cathar and we get back Lieutenant and Inquisitor Captain, and we can order our triggers so that we get the Captain ability and then the creature in play, and then we get the Thalia's Lieutenant buff to our whole board, and that should be good enough to win the game here. Yeah, sweet. So in the mirror match, obviously Thalia isn't great, so I think easy sideboarding here. We just replace the 3 Thalias with 1 Apparition and 2 Portable Hull, and then we keep the second Apparition in our sideboard to be able to grab with the Huntmaster. And in general, in the mirror match, I'm actually really happy with this build because, as that shows, you know, Huntmaster being able to grab Archon can basically just win the game on its own. And on the flip side as well, you know, other humans decks might also be boarding into Archon against us, but we can use Huntmaster to grab Voracious Hydra, which can kill the opponent's Archons. So this build feels kind of like the Mirror Breaker, where we can get our own Archon if the opponent doesn't have one, but we can also grab an answer to theirs if they have one as well. So I really like how this deck is set up in the mirror match. Okay, sweet. This hand looks pretty good. You know, 3 lands, we got a 1-drop, we got Ranged Captain on 3, and there we go, 4th lands, so we can play Company on 4 as well. So this hand looks pretty good. See what the opponent's got here. Okay, so they played Evangel. It's interesting that they played their Pathway on black there. I'd imagine that black was kind of a splash for like Kudro and Dire Tactics and stuff, so I'd normally expect them to play, you know, once they've already got a black source in play, to play that on white, but makes me think they might have a lot of removal in hand if they're doing that. Yeah, sorry, happy to attack with the Sentinel there, happy to trade it off. Because they're not likely, well, I mean, I guess if we think they've got removal, Sentinel could get value, but we're protecting with the Bodyguard already, so it doesn't really matter. So I think we'll attack first with both of these. I'm happy for them to trade off their Evangel with either of these creatures here, really. Okay, sound. So they block the Bodyguard, that makes sense. And then I think I'll range a Captain for a Giant Killer here. You know, just in case they have... Okay, so they've got Dire Tactics. Probably going to pay the 1. And we shouldn't sack the Ranger Captain here, obviously, because they haven't got a human, so they're going to be taking 3 off the Dire Tactics here. It's just free damage for us. So yeah, I think we'll take the Giant Killer here because we can either use it to just tap down creatures or hold on to it in case they go Thalia's Lieutenant and then make it really big. You know, that's one way that they could stabilise against us. Even though we have Portable Hull, I think at this point is probably a good shout. And just in case they have like a big creature that they've boarded in, that could be a way they win here. But I'm pretty confident, you know, with double company here, and they've had a very slow start, this is pretty good. So they're attacking in. We could company here and try and ambush them, but I think we're better off just taking the 3 damage and waiting until their end step so that if we hit an Evangel, we can use the Conjured Copy and just get a load of advantage. Okay, sweet. This is really good because we can Apparition their Kudro, and then we can use Huntmaster to trade in this Ollenbock Escort for an Archon of Absolution. And, you know, I imagine they have black removal in their sideboard in order to deal with Archon of Absolution, because that's a card that other decks are going to be bringing in against them as well as us. But, you know, getting hold of it makes them need black removal to be able to deal with it. So here, since they have played not many creatures, I imagine they've got a lot of removal, so they're probably killing the Apparition here, which would give them a 3/3 token. But I think I'm finding this because if their removal is black, like it is, yeah, like Noxious Grasp, I'm much happier for them to use something like a Noxious Grasp on Apparition when we have an Archon in hand. Even if they get a 3/3 token and they block the Sentinel here, we already have Portable Hull to kill the token. And I think I'm much happier playing company here and just trying to bait out all of their black removal so that we can then resolve Archon and win with that. So basically we're just trying to bait out all their black removal so that we can slam the Archon and hopefully it live. And even if they do kill all of our other stuff, they're already at 12, so that's a 4-turn clock with Archon. Again, similar to last game, it's kind of annoying they're tapping down our lands here because it forces us to play company during the main phase in case we do hit our Evangels. But again, it's really not the end of the world. We still get to cast company here, so tapping our lands first to give them less information. And then, oh wow, okay, this is a great hit. So we can get another Huntmaster to trade in Giant Killer for another Archon of Absolution. So even if they have black removal, now they need another Noxious Grasp or something. But more importantly, the Thalia's Lieutenant also turns our Huntmasters into 5/4s here, so they can't even trade off, the opponent can't trade off their Evangels for them in combat. So I'm pretty sure we've got this locked up now. It's going to be very difficult for them to win from this point. So we'll just attack them with everything here. They don't really have good blocks at all. You know, they can trade off with the Lieutenant or they can double block a Huntmaster, but they don't have really much else on other than that. And then we can just slam an Archon here, and we've got a second one in hand, so feel pretty good about this slot. Yeah, sweet. So yeah, I'm really happy with this build in the mirror match. It's pretty sweet.